And welcome back to Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. It's been quite the week for Barcelona. You start with the El Clasico loss, then your entire board steps down, and then you go on the road and get a win at Juventus. A Ronaldo-less Juventus, but a Juventus nonetheless, and get a statement win, or at least a much needed boost of confidence. It's never shocking to see Barcelona win a Champions League game, but for a team that's just been frustrated all season, getting that kind of result is incredibly important and does wonders for them mentally. And I really think part of the reason that they got that kind of result and played as well as they did was that they finally got this Bartomeu situation resolved. So he and his board stepped down. I don't want to say voluntarily because the reality is that they were facing a vote of no confidence. So there was every chance that they were going to get removed anyway. They just chose to do it on their own terms. After El Clasico and all of the building frustration and all of the infighting and the criticism that the players on the team continue to hurl at them and all of the frustration of the fan base, this has been an ongoing problem, and so we finally have a resolution in the form of everybody resigning and stepping down and letting somebody else take charge. Bartomeu had been the president since January 2014, so that gives you a timeline in terms of some of the transfer business and where Barcelona have been in the European hierarchy and the trajectory of what they've done in the Champions League. Correlation doesn't equal causation, but it's hard to argue at this point that the mistakes made by the board aren't part of the decline that we've seen. And ultimately, to me, this is just the first step. It's a very important step, and it was the first step because you were never going to fix the on-the-field stuff if you continued to have this much tension and turmoil between the players and the people that are in charge of the club. There was just no way this could continue with everybody staying the same. And much like a coach, the easier solution is to get the elected people, the board, out of there as opposed to overhauling the roster, which you can make some moves, and obviously your Luis Suarez's and Arturo Vidal's have moved on, but you can't just bring a completely new team in there. There are ramifications for having these stalwarts like Gerard Piqué and Messi move on. That's not necessarily something anybody wants. So this to me is the easier solution, and it's the solution this is the popular solution. There weren't a lot of people backing Bartomeu. It was a pro Messi, pro player majority. At least it very much seems that way to me. So now you've got that problem theoretically fixed. The new president's going to be appointed within 90 days. They've got interim people in there who are basically just there to get this election set up and then run the election. You still have some people with connections to Bartomeu and more traditionalists. You got a lot of people that are interested in running or have talked about running in the elections that were going to happen with connections to Xavi with the goal of eventually bringing him back as manager. I'm not going to go through all the details. Who knows what ends up happening, but you do have some fresh ideas in there. So theoretically, you're going to have a better relationship with the board, which then allows everybody to work together to start fixing the roster, because the roster isn't good enough either. But that's a secondary concern to having your players publicly criticize and openly despise the people that are running the team they play for. That's no longer going to be an issue. Which this also, so that's the first part. This is what had to happen to get this rolling in terms of fixing the issues. Then you can start looking at the roster and the changes that need to be made there, and the mentality part that needs to change as well, because I don't care how frustrated you are with what's going on at the board level. I will never be okay with senior players leaving guys like Serginho Dest to answer for a loss, and the guy wearing the captain's armband leaving Serginho Dest to answer for a loss. That will always rub me the wrong way. I understand that they were frustrated and it wasn't just about the game, but that's always going to bother me. So that part, there are other things that need to change. But now you can start focusing on retooling this roster, getting the next group of guys in, figuring out how to fit Antoine Griezmann in and get the most out of him, what you do with Ousmane Dembele, all of those things. And the other part of this is that it opens the door for Lionel Messi to end his career at Barcelona. It's not like he has always stayed true to what he said. He's changed his mind before. I said that when he said he wanted to leave. And it's important here too. Not that he's changed his mind about wanting to leave. I have no doubt his intention was to go as long as Bartomeu was in charge. But now that Bartomeu is gone, this is a very different situation. And I can absolutely see a world in which he signs a contract extension and ends his career at Barcelona like he wanted to. That is how much he despised Bartomeu and how much this changes everything. And I think you saw that on the field with the fact that he was actually smiling a little bit in the game against Juventus. So that's the other part of this, is it could have massive ramifications for Messi's career. He was not going to deal with this any longer, but now he doesn't have to. So who knows? He's going to have an opportunity to make a decision after this season, what he wants to do. Who knows if Pep's even planning to stay at City long term by that point. There are a lot of things up in the air. So to me, there's every chance that Messi ends up ending his career right where he wants to, which did not look like a possibility a couple months ago. But Bartomeu absolutely changes all that by deciding to resign. The other part of this is that on his way out, Bartomeu said that Barcelona has agreed to join this rumored European Super League, European Premier League thing they're calling it, that would theoretically replace the Champions League. And I haven't talked about it before on the show because it's been just rumors. This is not a thing that's actually happening at this point. But it may never happen, specifically when UEFA is coming out so strongly against it. It's got the backing of FIFA, but you can't change the Champions League without UEFA. So it may never come to fruition, which is why I felt like this was a good time to address it, because Bartomeu just threw it out there as he left. And this is really all I want to say about it. Here are some of the teams that have expressed support for this idea. PSG, who reached the Champions League round of 16, round of 16, round of 16, quarterfinals, 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 and quarterfinals prior to making the final last season. Manchester United, who have won a Europa League, an FA Cup, an EFL Cup, and Community Shield since 2012-2013. AC Milan, who have won a Supercoppa Italiana since 2010-2011. And Inter, who have literally won nothing since 2010-2011. My point is this. I am open to having conversations about changing the Champions League, altering the format, doing something different. Happy to have that conversation. I am not okay with creating a closed system where you get 18 teams or however many in there, and then say that's that. And specifically because, A, it's just not fair, and what makes the Champions League cool is getting to see your Ajaxes of the world make a run at the semifinals and get to play the best teams in the best leagues in the world to see where they stack up, because they're a traditional power, one of the most storied teams in the history of the sport, who don't have that opportunity in the league because they can't change the country they're in. Or it allows a Red Bull Leipzig to make a run like they did last season. Leicester, once they win the league, gets to go compete in the Champions League and make the quarterfinals and go toe-to-toe with Atletico Madrid. You can go example after example. Look at Lyon last season. There's unpredictable things that happen in the Champions League. That's part of what makes it fun. And part of what makes it fun is seeing some of these teams have an opportunity, Rennes, for example, this season, to prove themselves against the best of the best. It is something you have to earn. That's the whole point, is that you do it through your performance in the league over an entire season. The most consistent teams get to play in the Champions League. It's the incentive for teams when so many of these leagues are just boring by the end because Liverpool's running away with it, Juventus is running away with it, Bayern's running away with it, PSG runs away with it every season. You get the point. So for these teams to decide that they are so high and mighty that they're going to close the door, if that is in fact what they are suggesting. There's just no details on what this is actually going to look like yet, much less if it'll actually happen. But I'm going to read you this again. PSG, 3 round of 16 exits, 4 quarterfinals in the Champions League prior to last season. And I just make that point because all they're trying to do is win the Champions League, and they haven't come particularly close until last season. They lost in the round of 16 3 straight seasons. And I don't even have a problem with them being one of the 18 teams in this, really. And then United have won a Europa League, an FA Cup, an EFL Cup, and Community Shield since 2012-2013. They have not really been relevant on the European scene since they last won the Premier League. AC Milan have a Supercoppa Italiana since 2010-11, and Inter have won nothing since then. I understand these are traditional powers, and that absolutely plays a role in this. But for these teams to just decide that because they're big brands, they can shut everybody out, again, if that's what they're actually trying to do, is ridiculous. And there's a real question of whether people actually want this, whether people will watch it. Because you're going to get a lot of what you got from Barcelona and Juventus, and it wasn't a particularly spectacular game. I want meritocracy. I want to see Erling Haaland playing for Salzburg have a chance to go play against Liverpool and build his profile in the Champions League so that I can sit here and say, like I did a couple weeks ago, look at what he did against the best teams in the world. It should not be a surprise that he's scoring every game practically for Borussia Dortmund and is going to become one of the most expensive transfers in the history of the sport. You could see it because he was doing it. He wasn't just doing it in Austria. He was doing it against Liverpool. I want to see what it looks like when Jamie Vardy does what he did when Leicester won the Premier League and then gets to go play against these really good teams. I want to see what Rennes can do. I want Lyon to have an opportunity to compete on the European scene in a season where they weren't great in the league, and that was the thing that they had to hold on to. I want teams that finish at the top of their leagues to have this opportunity and to have the financial resources then and the appeal to build to that next step to get to a point where you can then solidify yourself, much like Atalanta is doing right now, much like Leicester did. This money and the ability to play in the Champions League absolutely matters, and the Europa League to a certain extent as well. If you're going to decide that you're just better than everybody else and that nobody else gets to compete in this Premier League thing, if in fact it happens, all I'm saying is you got to actually be good enough to do that. And some of these teams just have not been good enough to be proposing that kind of thing. Look at what Manchester United have done in the league the past 8, 9, 10 seasons since they won it. If you're going to decide that you're not going to let, you can go down the list. Leicester, Everton, one of the big six potentially, or you're AC Milan and Inter Milan and you're not going to let Atalanta have a chance, or whatever it might be. You got to at least consistently be better than them for me to take you seriously. I mean, those are some of the teams that are in favor of this thing, and I I will never buy into that. I think it's kind of funny that they're trying to potentially cut this thing off and they're really pushing for it, and they can't even be at the top of their own domestic leagues, let alone control the Champions League. I feel differently about a Barcelona who also have their own issues that you can look at right now. And look at Juventus. I mean, all these teams are having a really tough time, and yet here we are talking about them potentially forming a closed shop European Premier League. I don't think it's going to happen. I don't want it to happen, but that's the one point I really wanted to make, is just look at the past decade or so for some of these teams that are in favor of this thing. You gotta actually be the best teams in Europe for me to take you seriously and consider for a second that this might actually be a good idea. Over in Major League Soccer, we're getting close to determining who the best team is. It was not pretty. It was very strange circumstances, but the Philadelphia Union get a win over Chicago thanks to a second half Corey Burke goal. They got plenty of help in the form of a red card that even Jim Curtin said was not a red card, and a rather questionable penalty, but they come away with 3 points. It's just one of those games where it's a really good team, you got to find a way to win, and they did. NYCFC then puts in a really good performance against Toronto, comes away with a victory. So the Union are 3 points up on everybody now, and 538's got them up to an 86% chance of winning the Supporters' Shield, which is incredible. So a huge night for them. Sporting Kansas City, Portland, LAFC, New York Red Bulls, New England, and Nashville all clinch playoff spots. They join Philly, Toronto, Columbus, Orlando, NYCFC, and Seattle, who had already clinched them. So there are 2 spots left in the East and 4 in the West as we get down to the very end of this season, and plenty of teams still in contention for those. Also want to highlight Nashville here for a second. Congratulations on getting into the playoffs in year 1. Because A, it's just statistically something that doesn't happen all that often. You can go look at the numbers. But 2, the teams that in recent years have gotten in are your LAFCs and Atlantas of the world. Any of these teams who have come in and not thrown money around and not come in as a big brand with high profile players, Minnesota, Orlando's in the playoffs for the first time. Now NYCFC also would be into that category with the players that they had initially and have consistently been in the playoffs through their time in the league, entering with Orlando. But a lot of these other teams that have taken a little while and taken the slower route, Cincinnati, that don't come in with all of this money to throw around and immediately have one of the best rosters in the league the way Atlanta and LAFC did, it takes years to build this thing. Look at Minnesota. Adrian Heath has done this right, and he would have told you from day one it's going to take time, and only last season did he get to a point where he felt like he had a roster to compete. And so now he's extremely confident in his team and will happily destroy anybody who doubts them. But he maintained from the beginning, I know what I'm doing, it's just going to take time. Orlando has just not been able to figure out their defense until this season. Cincinnati still has it's only year 2, but one of the worst rosters in the league. They're getting a little bit better, but this is a process. And for Nashville to come in, make the big trade for Walker Zimmerman that's worked out really well, bring in a couple impact players right away, but not necessarily big names. Guys with good track records, they're DP caliber, that are going to be difference makers on your team and key players, but we're not talking about Carlos Velas here. And to get this done in a very strange season that presents you with different kinds of challenges, it's incredibly impressive. The way that they have turned this thing into an MLS level team that can really compete and be in the top half of the league. So good for them. Really impressive accomplishment. That's really all I have on MLS for now. We're going to take our second break. When we come back, what's next? We'll talk this week's MLS action, this week's weekend's action in Europe, and a little look ahead to the Europa League this afternoon. That's all coming up next. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports.